we can see that there's an $800 a head difference from the best one to the worst one. We want to get good ones up and bad ones down. I mean, we're not producing calves, we're producing beef. And once we got to that mindset, it's pretty exciting. Everybody's starting to think a little bit more about how do we get involved with this.
Welcome to the Future Beef Show in partnership with Drovers and Breedr. This is the place to connect with people, innovations, and success stories shaping the next era of beef production. I'm your host, Jim Johnson from Brands and Barbed Wire. As usual, I've got my global specialists with us today, Dr. Jessica Sperber, feedlot specialist from the University of Nebraska, and Ian Wheal, founder of Breedr, the cattle tech company championing producer-led beef supply chains. As always, you'll find additional resources and tools at thefutureofbeef.com with a free trial to Breedr app to take your operation to the next level. Today's topic, beating the bell curve. It's all about managing cattle individually to maximize performance and profitability. Joining us today is John Schroeder, General Manager of Darr Feeders, to share his insights on optimizing your herd beyond the averages. Let's dive in. Jessica, why don't you introduce our topic today, and then we'll introduce our guest, John Schroeder.
Yeah, so we're going to cover individual animal management today, something that we really haven't seen a lot of in the feed yard sector, but that can produce a lot of excellent information for us on an individual animal basis. As we sell more and more cattle in the beef and on the carcass, we get more data back on an individual basis, but how can we connect that back to the cow-calf producer and kind of make it a full circle beef system that we can essentially capture individual animal intakes, gains, and overall performance.
Okay, interesting. Well, our guest to talk about that today is John Schroeder. He's the manager of Darr Feeders in Nebraska. John, for our listeners, maybe they don't know or aren't familiar with you, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks for the introduction. Again, I'm John Schroeder from Darr Feedlot in Cozad, Nebraska. We're a 48,000 head commercial feedlot. And so we custom feed cattle for a lot of ranchers that are retaining ownership, as well as a number of investors. The retained ownership is kind of a special thing when it comes to individual data. We don't have the ability to cheapen up those cattle on the initial buy. And so the only way we can really add value to those cattle is to make those cattle perform as well as they possibly can. So a big part of that is getting them set up ahead of time and making those individual decisions that will add value to those cattle. And we can see that there's an $800 a head difference from the best one to the worst one. We want to get good ones up and bad ones down. And so look forward to visiting with you today.
So when you say $800 a head, is that within a pen or within the feed yard? I mean, where's that sort of difference come in?
It's definitely within the feed yard. It can be within the pen. And so some of these ranches that calve for a longer period of time, you'll definitely see some of that difference. A lot of these that are really similar in genetics, that can be a lot tighter model, but definitely within the feedlot, we see that difference individually. And that's a drastic difference.
Yeah, it's a huge difference, especially when you're trying to market them roughly on the same day, right?
Correct.
So, so tell us a little bit more about the diversity at Darr and what you guys do there, and maybe give some of our listeners what happens from the time animals arrive until the time they leave.
Sure, I think we've worked with a lot of programs in the past that drive value to, again, add value for those customers, whether they're retained customers or investor customers. I think the biggest thing we got to think about is who's our consumer at the end, and what their quality and what their definition of quality might be different amongst some of those consumers. So we've always believed to get a premium, we have to give somebody what they want, when they want it, when no one else can. And so sometimes that's a seasonal difference. There's definitely times of the year that's tougher to hit that demand. There's just not the available amount of cattle out there to hit seasonal opportunities. And so sometimes it's just being at the right place at the right time with that quality of product. And so as we identify where those tough spots are to hit a market, those are nice ways to stretch out cattle and develop them change maybe some calving dates, change how we grow cattle to hit those time frames, and have beef systems that are more efficient to hit those better markets. Sometimes we'll give up some efficiency in order to hit the right market. And again, as we've got into more of these ratable type marketing agreements, you definitely have to supply beef all year round. And so it's just enormous amount of beef systems when we look across our country, and you look at the local resources that we utilize in Dawson County, Nebraska, and we take full advantage of that community. But also the cow-calf producers that are producing those calves are utilizing all the resources they have across the country and even across the borders of how they're using their local resources to best produce calves that have successful outcomes to meet those demands to bring that premium product back. So I think there's a lot of ways to measure. And I think, we talk about genetics, and that's definitely where it starts with our seed stock producers and the conversations we can share with them and the ranchers that are buying genetics from them. But then it's also the management at the ranch. Sometimes that can be vaccine programs. Sometimes that can be mineral programs. Sometimes it's how they're managing dietary nutrition, at different parts of the ranch. You've got definite differences amongst pastures. And so it's not only about what sire is having an impact, it's about what sire is having an impact in which pasture. So it really takes a lot of data and good data to answer some of these questions. And so there's some noise in some of the data we have because we don't drill down and ask enough of that detail. So at Darr, we've worked a long time at trying to have those relationships with people, both up the chain with us as far as getting data back from the packer, which we've had good success in getting good read rates with electronic tags and getting that data back and dumped in electronically, so we're not typing that in by hand. But now we got to figure out how we can keep sharing that information ahead of us to backgrounders, to cow-calf producers, to the seed stock people, and how does some of that information that they have, how can that be brought up into to a central database to ask some of those questions? So how do we make actionable decisions off of some of this data is where I really start the conversation.
Ian, how would you help people with transferring that data up and down, both from the seed stock all the way to the packer?
Well, I think the first point that John makes is a really good one, which is so people have a lot of data. And, if you look at what's happened over the last 10 years with getting carcass data back into the feed yards, and more people are getting that, we're actually getting more data, and to the point where we're inundated with data. And, I even go to some ranches where they've got a really nice wayhead, but all their data sits on that wayhead and has never been downloaded into a spreadsheet and any analysis done on it to actually do any research. So I think the big thing we've always focused on is how do you actually get consistent data in a way that's captured consistently? Firstly, let's not have free text. I've seen 1,000 different ways of people writing Tyson, and you would have thought that's an easy word to spell, right? So it's those are sort of things which are, basic things, and how you capture that data, how do you move those animals along the supply chain. But, John, I'm really interested on your journey of where you've come from, a bit of your history as well. I know you're at Cargill for a while doing some stuff there. Looking forward, you're looking for these actual insights and the collaboration, but how did you even get to where you are today? What's been that journey over the last 10 years of sort of going from lot-based system to, where you are analyzing carcass? I know you look at the back fat on every animal to see if it should have been CAB, and you're checking up for your customers if it gets there. That's such a level of detail that most people aren't doing. What took you from where you are to where you are today?
So I got out of college and was a meats and livestock judge in college, and appreciated those experiences, and took a job at Cargill at XL in Dodge City, Kansas. Started out in the packing plant as a procurement trainee, and got a chance to go through all of the packing plant, which was a great experience. And then got an opportunity to schedule fat cattle and help with doing some carcass data, setting some of that up, was on the kill floor, helping collect some of those things so I know what can go right and what can go wrong. And so when you see some of those things that don't make a lot of sense, it's nice to have people that have had that experience. And Jess and I were talking about that the other night, about how powerful and how neat that is for college kids, and an opportunity to collect data in a packing plant and really understand what that process is like. And so, good data is a big part of this. So from there, I got a chance to buy fat cattle for Cargill, and was in Kearney, Nebraska, kind of covered central Nebraska and up through the Dakotas. Got a chance to really work with a lot of individuals. And at that time, we were just getting started with electronic tags. And so I remember programming how I could scan an electronic tag into an Excel spreadsheet. And we developed a really dirt simple program to do that and record weights. And so that's how we really got started, was just being passionate about, working with ranchers that wanted that information, and followed up in the feedlots that were selling cattle to me at Cargill. And I was taking some to Dodge City, some to Fort Morgan, Colorado, and some to Schuyler, Nebraska at the time. And, following them through and taking those ranchers to the packing plants and watching those cattle harvest, just getting started with some of that's where we really first started, and started seeing, wow, there's quite a spread between these things. And I remember there was even, back then we noticed that there was a huge difference in fine marbling versus coarse marbling. We saw there was differences in how the pizzle eye shape came in on a rib eye. And so there's a ton more things to tackle besides just some of the things we're measuring today. And I think that's the thing we have to remember as we're looking for that quest of the perfect steak, is we haven't even begun to start really identifying some of those attributes that we may want to test for. As I got the opportunity to really want to go back into production agriculture, and Craig Uden's one of my partners there at Darr Feedlot, and he challenged me. He says, "Are you going to just keep complaining about things, or you're going to actually come back into production agriculture and do it?" And so I took that challenge, and so Craig and I laugh about that conversation, but that's really how I got a chance to come back in. I wanted to grow roots and settle down and raise my family, and we really appreciate the area we're in, but that's where it got started. And so when I started in 2007 with Darr, we had just had a great big ice storm in that December of 2006. It knocked down all the power lines. And it was really interesting. The calves that were born in that really rough weather of 2007, and those cows that were on those corn stalks with an inch of ice around the corn stalks, and some producers that didn't feed them and just made them rough it and eat through that inch of ice to grab that corn stalks. Prenatal programming, those 2007 model cows, they never gained as well, they never graded as well. So by having our individual data, we really recognized that those 2007 model cows in general didn't hold up to the model years around them. And so it was just things like that we recognized when we did individual data. And so by, seeing that, okay, here's a 705, tagged ranch calf, its mother was an 2007 model, just collecting that data and putting it into our database and breaking that out and having conversations with ranchers. That's where we kind of got started with some of the individual management. And then the other thing we started seeing is, okay, the pastures that we have that are in these hard clay hills versus some of these pastures that are down in the lush river bottoms, we've got differences of how they're doing overall. And so recognizing some of those things, and can we manage those differently? Can we put a little bit of cake out for periods of time, and does that make a difference? And it does at times. Is it a change in mineral program? Is there something that we're tying up? We had some selenium tie-ups in South Dakota that, especially with some of those higher sulfur levels in some of those West River water systems there, there's some things just a simple mineral change made big differences. And so depending on what pasture they were in and how we manage that, that's going to be the next step of how do we take these groups and pastures and apply that to those individuals that were there. And so we've got a huge database that we keep in an old dirty SQL database. It's kind of clumpy, but it's consistent. And then to pull that out, we've had, tools like Power BI or we can bring something down into a spreadsheet and we can do a lot of things, but we've still got to find ways that we can upload that data up to us and share those types of conversations from ahead of us and push data down below and have some restrictions. There's some things that we collect that we want to keep closer to the chest, or that we may want to share with some, but not share with others, depending what kind of partners they are and what kind of actors they are sometimes as well. And that goes both ways. And so I think having an opportunity to do that, we've got a chance to do some business with a company called Breedr that's really opened that opportunity up for us. We've been building some ways to have more cattle induction, bring that data in, and then by scanning an EID tag that we've taken DNA on ahead of time and being able to go to the cloud and say, what does this match up with? And then be able to sort by DNA and the attributes that we see at the chute and make a decision on how we sort. I think that's a lot of the future ahead of us, but we only can do that if we've been able to collaborate ahead of time. And so some of that is going to be a lot of fun. How do we put that into actionable results? How do I get to where I have actions of being able to sort chute side with that data that comes into me? I mean, I'd still like to know which pasture did they come in. Do I, odds favor that if I handle them this way, I'm going to have better results. And I think that's just going to take time to work with, but we really want to get to that type of individual management standpoint. And we're not quite there yet, but with, partners as we work going forward, I think that's the exciting part. It's changing really fast.
Yeah, I tell you, there's a lot to unpack there, but the most important question I have is, how do I get on that quest for the perfect steak taste panel?
I think that's the best thing is sharing our product and get in front of people. And that's really how we've gotten a lot of people to come together. When we get together, eat the product that we're producing and share that passion for that perfect steak with all of those stakeholders, that's really changed our mind. I mean, we're not producing calves, we're producing beef. And once we got to that mindset, everybody's starting to think a little bit more about how do we get involved with this? It's pretty exciting. How do I do my part of this mission? And when we think about the quality of that steak, it's definitely a fight for marbling. How do we continue to add marbling? And the thing that you have to think about is you can only do so much. Your genetics are the big part of that start. And so we know that our seed stock producers, we have to have them involved and produce good genetics that give us a chance to be successful. But then after that, we have to remember that marbling is a lifetime event. And as I talk to the people that work for me and work with me in our feed yard, I try to stress that why. Why is this so important? Every day we have a chance to put a marbling point in. It's a linear line, marbling is. And if we have an event with bad weather, or cattle get sick, or we've implanted something too quick before we've got the mega cows to deliver on that, we're going to take that marbling point away and not add it. And so far, I haven't found a way to really add 2 marbling points the next day and make it up. I just got to do it the right way tomorrow and get back on track. And so with that mindset, everybody along the supply chain, that quality is up to you every day to make sure that calf has a successful day and add a marbling point so we can really make consumers have that great eating experience. So why is it so important to go pull that calf in the worst weather? Why is it so important to lay down that bedding? Why is it so important to make those management decisions to keep cattle comfortable? It matters. That's pretty powerful. And when you can find people that make that commitment, that's the kind of people I want to do more business with, not less. And so I want to make sure that they're successful, that you can talk sustainability, but sustainability is making sure that you can do it again tomorrow. That means they got to be profitable. I want to invest in those individuals that are making those efforts. And so that's really where the individual piece starts at.
So Dr. Sperber, tell us about maybe some of the research you're doing at the University of Nebraska around individual management, or some of the things that you and John might be working on similarly.
Yeah, so we are very fortunate at UNL to have many commercial feedlots within our state that are very open with us and honest, and we can do great commercial research with them. Darr has had me out to the operation many times and has given me many closeouts to look at and form better decisions. We just built a large expansion onto our university feedlot called the Klosterman Feedlot Innovation Center. And with that, all of our pen sizes are now at a commercial scale. So one of our major challenges with research is, or that we get some pushback on, is that many research pens are 10 to 20 head. We put in 60 head pens into our new Feedlot Innovation Center, bringing our total number of cattle on feed at one time at the university up past 4,000 head, which is quite impressive for a university system. In addition, we have the Kloffenstein Feeding Center, which is the individual animal management feeding barn, essentially. So what that has, we put in Incentec bunks. We have 240 head in that barn. There's 40 bunks. Each of those bunks can allow 5 animals to eat from them. What's cool about the Hoco Farms Incentec bunks is you can do so many different things with them because it's measuring weight of the feed of that individual animal while they're eating from it. And then if you wanted to, if you were limit feeding in a study or whatever you want to do, they get to whatever their 5 pounds daily allowance was or whatever it is, you can kick them out. And they can't eat from that bunk for the rest of the day. It also monitors how many meals those animals are coming up for, their feeding behavior, what time of the day they're visiting the bunk, what animals they're following when they come up to visit that bunk. It's very cool from an individual animal management standpoint, because as a university system, then we can create commercial type results on these 60 head or 30 head pens in that barn on individual animal feeding, where dry matter intake of the individual is nearly impossible within a commercial feedlot because of pen masking. So it's we're very excited. We have cattle in the facility now and online, and there's just so much opportunity, especially when we have great collaborators out in the industry, such as our many feed yards in Nebraska that offer up their facilities to assist us with commercial type results.
And Jesse, how are you seeing it with, like, what John's talking about, where it's going back to the pasture of where they're coming out of, like that, even at the university, it must be hard to try and get to that level of granularity of data on individual. Are you working with cow-calf, or have you got your own operation there that you're working with? Like how are you thinking about removing the error, basically?
Yeah. So in a lot of our system, we will bring those calves in and they'll go onto grass or onto stalks for a certain period of time. For us, it's all in stratifying those cattle and making sure that they are truly randomized as they go on to treatments, to try and take out any of that error or I guess trying to release some of the variation across treatment.
Yeah. I just think it's super interesting how, like, you started because you recognize that, from one lot of cattle and the impact they had, not just in that year, but the years after, where if that cow-calf operation knows to cull the 07s, what it would do for their operation in terms of that feedback level. What's that done for your business? Like, it feels like you, over a lot of other feed yards, have just such a, and not the only one who has such a close relationship, but you have such a close relationship with these cow-calf operations. How are you finding being that middleman that sort of sits in between them and the packer, and you're trying to translate customer needs all the way back down to them, but you're also trying to work out what they need? They are your customer at the end of the day. Like,
so I think the big challenge is when you lay out a program like that, you've got to deliver. And so the worst thing that happens is when you don't get data back that that you've promised, and something happens in a packing plant, it doesn't get recorded. We mess up and cut out a ranch tag. We get a lot of producers that like to come look at their cattle, and if we've cut out that ranch tag, they'd like to be able to see them. Fortunately, we record those and we have them in our database. They just don't see them in the pen. But those types of things have to be communicated well. I think the success we've had is being able to push that back and get some meaningful change and find out what's working and what's not. The frustrating thing is, for a long time we've worked really hard, spent some dollars to get that data, and you give that back to somebody and they just throw it in the filing cabinet and there's no action taken. And we've done way too much of that over the last 20 years. We're working harder now of how do we make that into actionable results. I'm not here to try to manage anybody else's business. I just need to be able to communicate, this is what's working for me. This isn't what's working for me. That's got to go back to you ahead of me to fix that so that it makes me look good. I like to look good, but it only happens if the people ahead of me help me out a little bit. And so that part is a little bit of that. I think we have to be blunt. We can't sugarcoat it. We have to have real data that's doesn't have a lot of noise in it, and make sure we say, this is where we want to be. This is where we're at. One thing that's really helped with that is laying out, here's what our yard average is. Here's the highest, here's the lowest, here's a standard deviation. For me, there's a lot of things that I get introduced to and I go, well, is that a good number or a bad number? Until you get to see what that number and what that range looks like, you really don't know. And I don't need to be 100th or 90th percentile in some of those categories, but I need to be, better than 50th percentile. And so I think those are things that when you can break down, here's the 5 things that affect profitability for us. And it might be outweight. It might be average daily gain, whether they grade choice, and I like to look at marbling. Are they back fat? How fat are they? What's the ribeye size? What's that acceptable ranges? Where do we want to be and where are we out of bounds with some of those data sets? And if I don't like to just do a one trait selection. If I want to improve marbling, I don't want to go grab the highest marbling bull out there. I want to find a bull that'll improve marbling without decreasing any of those other traits that I have. And I think we're finding people have more success when they just move the needle a little bit higher, but don't affect those other traits that we're really good at. And a lot of times what I hate to see is when you got somebody that's really good and then starts doing a single trait selection and ruins all the things they're good at. We have to be careful with that too. So, make sure that you give and compliment where people are at and where they're successful. And boy, you're on the top end. You're at the 90th percentile. I don't know if you need to chase that much more, but can we work in this? And so I think those are things to think about.
And is there something that defines those cow-calf operations that, take that data and don't stick it in the filing cabinet? Like, what have you seen? Like, if you were to say, is it the way the operation's managed? Is it the way they approach innovation? Like, what are the things you see in those? Like, what gets them moving?
So you've got some people that are really passionate that tag every calf and really know their cow herd, and you see a size that you can keep that in your mind. And then you get to operations that are at a size that need some help from a technology standpoint. There's a lot of cows that are calved out that don't get tagged. They'll maybe tag their first calf heifers or their second tag calf heifers, and then after that, those cows are kind of on their own, and they'll catch them back at branding, and at that time they may put an EID tag in them. But we really don't have a ranch tag to go back and try to marry back up to. Now, my limited opportunities of calving cows, and my wife Lori would tell you, I'm not always the best person to put the right ranch tag and the right calf, marrying them up right anyway. So there's some noise in that data when we've done that historically. So especially as we go forward, we're seeing more and more opportunity to work with DNA and use match DNA sets. So we're putting an electronic tag that's matched in with the DNA sample kit. So when we put that ranch DNA, collect it, got the electronic tag in, we're matched up. And so that's a way that we can get parentage back. And we know that that's going to be more accurate than our ranch tags. And so we're taking noise out of that system. I think that's been a helpful way to go at it.
Ever wondered if you could be getting more out of your cattle?
Breedr is the first technology company that's able to track and optimize cattle from conception all the way to the rail. This puts the power of data into the hands of the rancher and enables them to improve their profit line quicker than they ever have before.
My decision to partner with Breedr was made largely after seeing a demo where I realized what Breedr's doing is unlike anyone else in our industry. Connecting the data from the packing plant back to the feedlot, the stocker backgrounders, and the cow-calf, even connecting that data to the purebred breeder, will just open the door to improvement at a scale and a speed that we have never seen in this industry before.
I believe Breedr's putting ranchers in the driver's seat. We can make breeding decisions based on large amounts of data very quickly. The calves that are produced, they have a higher cutout value, their ribeyes are more profitable, and it plays back to us.
As I'm out around the country, people are asking me about Breedr, and I always recommend Breedr. It's the tool for the future.
The other thing you have to remember is we still have to do things at a size that matters. You have to be big enough to be good at something, and to justify having the right equipment, to justify the efficiencies, you've got to be big enough to be good at it. Now, if you're an individual operation and you aren't big enough, then you've got to work with other partners that are like-minded in the genetics and like-minded in the vaccine and mineral programs that they're working with. And so it doesn't mean you can't still be a small producer, but you're going to have to work with others that are like-minded. So when we look at some of those types of systems, just understand that we've got 200 head pens at our feedlot, and we want to put a 3-way sort on a set of steers. That means you got to have 600 head of steers. It means you really got to have 1,200 head of cattle coming off of ranches to really be at a size that matters. So there's not a lot of those sizes of ranches. So you really got to work with others. Even as a feedlot our size, as we look at what do we have to be in to be involved in a ratable supply program that operates at the efficiency, the industry's got to be close to 300,000 head of cattle to really operate at its total efficiency to feed a program. And we only market about 108,000 a year. So we've got to work with other feed yards in order to get to that size. So it goes even at a 48,000 head yard, we're not large enough to do it on our own. And so with that mindset, we still share that downstream. And we work with a lot of producers that are 100 head calf herds and smaller, but we work with a lot of them that are pretty large. And so I think it's a little bit different between all of those, but I think some of those technologies have helped us bridge some of that gap. I hope that made some sense.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you said, as we have listeners that might be smaller and they might be larger, right? That there's an opportunity to improve and to track that data all the way through to the packing plant, no matter what size they are. It just takes a little more coordination, maybe a little more innovation for some of them, but there's opportunities to do it no matter what your size is. I think that's interesting.
Well, and I think what's interesting about Darr is if you don't have a weigh scale that, I would always want people to have a weigh scale if you're 100 head or 20 head on their operation to check their own weaning weights individually, back to that variation of $800 a head. But you can work with people like Darr to capture that data as it hits the backgrounding in the feed yard. And I think that's where it becomes very interesting on the collaboration. If you want to get started, it doesn't have to be a massive barrier.
Well, I think, we talk about coordination, right? Even if you're a small person, but there's, 5 of you that have 20 head,
Yep.
You can go together and buy scale. just buy a portable one. You can take it around the different ranches and
you
weigh
might get an
them.
extra
So-
pair of hands as well.
So
at the
there's
same time.
there's opportunities to to work together and it's not just an investment for one person. So
Yeah.
We've also seen vet clinics that have made those investments and went out and processed and help with that. And, again, we go ahead and we build autogenous vaccine specifically to see what's, killing cattle at Darr. And I always tell people, the disease that kills your cattle, it doesn't necessarily come from that ranch, but if they're not vaccinated and don't build immunity to be able to handle that challenge when they come into a feedlot, I'll be the first to admit we can be a cesspool of disease in a big yard. And if those cattle haven't been vaccinated and build that immunity, they're going to struggle a little bit. And so getting the right vaccine, doing it in the right way so that you build immunity is a big step to having some success. Again, we are not going to add marbling. We're sure not going to have gain if we don't have those cattle healthy. So I think those are investments that are worthwhile too. And you have to have that vet-patient relationship to do that in different parts of the country. And so those vets in those local areas have a big impact. And our vets are really good about communicating and having a relationship with some of those vets, whether that's out in Idaho or whether that's up in South Dakota. We want to make sure that we're a resource for those ranches to help us get, again, I want to look good. I need all the help I can get.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's interesting. And, I think I'm not a veterinarian, but nutrition and vaccines, if you don't have the right nutrition, you can vaccinate all day long and they're not going to build that immunity up. Right. And so I think there's probably some things that have to coexist in order to bring that healthy calf to the feed yard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that every yard manages that different, right? It's like the receiving calf paradox that, how much feed should you be giving them and at what energy level? Some people don't like bringing calves in and putting them onto a high energy diet, but some people do. And it's all different in how you need to manage them. But a lot of it should be based off of the origin of that calf and what that calf has experienced up till the day that they arrive onto the feedlot. I do have a question, Ian. So if I'm a cow-calf producer and I have, let's say I'm going to market 125 calves, and I don't believe that I'm large enough to direct sell into a feed yard, but I want data back on the bull program that I've been using. If I market those calves through an auction barn, I don't necessarily know
which is where they would go. Yeah.
How can I still get that data without fully knowing which feed yard my cattle went to? Is there an opportunity?
So I think certainly is like we've built our network. Like if those animals pop back up again with an EID, we will get in touch with people. I think there's a big opportunity here for the auction barns to embrace some of this technology and help because, they are a conduit for a lot of those herds. Like there's no doubt if you're selling 200 head of calves and you can fill a truck and 50,000 pounds, like then you're building a direct relationship. For if you're under 50,000 pounds, it's difficult. And I think actually I see an opportunity for those auction barns to start working in these sort of sharing the data, working with feed yards and, helping direct that as it goes through, because that's added value there, then adding to that supply chain. And, you can still direct market. We see people similar to like who have half a load, but, if you get down to selling 10 in a go, that's even harder, right,
Mm-hmm.
at that stage. And, what I would suggest at that stage is find the Darr around the corner and send some of your cattle there, agree a price and, try and work it out. But make sure that feed yard is tracking the individuals. Because if you merge that with a pen, the number of times I've seen an average sent back to that cow calf and you don't know if it's his were the worst 10 or his were the best 10, like that is a big problem once you get to that level. If you can fill a whole pen, you're keeping your contemporary groups together and all of that is very different. But, you have to work with a feed yard that's tracking that individually and getting the carcass data.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a consistent theme as we go through these podcasts is customer service, right? I think it's customer service with John, it's customer service with seed stock producers or whatever, right? The more successful operations are providing more and more customer service back to their customers, whether it's individual, information that tracks back or whatever. And you think about, auction markets, right?
Yeah.
If they want to be more and more successful in the future, they're going to have to innovate and provide more customer service back to their customers as well.
Yeah.
At Darr, we've had EID tags in cattle for over 20 years now in everything. So we've made that investment in recording individual animals, and we've tied that to an origin ID. And Ian, just like you described earlier, we started out just typing in the ranch name, and we ended up finding that we had 5 different names for the same ranch. So we did go to a digital code for each ranch so that we kept some consistency. But, we might have 42 ranches that go into a 2,000 head lot that were weaning, running out on cover crops or corn stalks, sort off a heavy cut to come into the feedlot that heavy cut will finish in May. We'll continue to take a heavy cut off before we go to grass, and those cattle might finish in that Sep-Oct time frame. And then we're taking cattle that come off of grass in July and August and September, and we might have fat cattle that go out to February, March. So we've really got cattle in that May all the way to the following March that are getting marketed off of 42 different ranches, and we know individually what each one of those are, and we keep that back in our database. And so some of it's also looking at what's that histogram look like, if I'm buying 100 head from this ranch, are they all targeted in that May-June time frame, or do I have a Duke's mix and they spread all the way from May all the way to March? And what's that pattern look like? And so there's a lot of different ways we look at some of that data. And as we go back and are trying to procure cattle for certain markets, that's another way to look at it. It's interesting to know that. I think the thing as a rancher to understand is we've been collecting this for a long time, and we know to get good ones up and bad ones down. Believe me, the industry's been watching, and so your reputation is worth something. Why it's that way, I think that's where the individual management and asking the right questions to fix sometimes just a simple mineral program change can be all the world. It can. We've had 50-60% morbidity, pull rates in the first 30 days, and then revac them, and it just shuts off. And had that happen for 2 years in a row. Finally, bled some cows and figured out what it was. Made a quick mineral change, and for 10 years haven't had a problem. Those are fun success stories, and you have the ability to do business with somebody that you really had on the chopping block that said, never again am I going to buy these cattle again. That's the difference.
Well, and the danger is, if you don't know your own data or you don't have that relationship, is that feed yard or that buyer just disappears, and they don't go and have a conversation with you and say, if you just change your mineral, I'll buy your calves for the next 10 years. Right. So I think that's where those relationships help, is like, and I think that's the challenge also with the sale barn, is if you don't know, but the feed yard has some idea, you're at a disadvantage. So as a rancher, you need to know as much as what your buyer knows about your own cattle and how do you work with it. And, probably to extend on your question, the other way is to retain some ownership. Now, that's not always possible from a cash flow perspective, but, there's opportunities out there to part ownership some of those cattle. Like, you don't have to own everything to put it into a feed yard. Like, I know Darr does that, we do that. There's a lot of people that help with that retained ownership if you really want to know, because then it's your data too. They're your cattle. So
yeah, it was interesting years ago when I was at Virginia Cattlemen's, we started a retained ownership program for people. So we take small groups from each different herd and allow those people to experience what a retained ownership was like and get that data back, which was really informative, right? I mean, you really learn a lot when you retain ownership, because most people, life stops at weaning.
Yeah.
Right? They don't know a lot more after that. Send them to the sale barn or selling them to a feeder. they just know that maybe next year they didn't sell them to the same guy, and it just
you don't know
that
why.
spin, right? And they don't know why. And so it was really an informative opportunity for those guys to get data back and understand what they're doing, what they're doing in their operation. They might send the really good ones, they might send the really bad ones, but they're getting information back on their
So
herd.
John, without cow-calf operation asking for their data, and I'm saying not retaining ownership, do you guys reach out and discuss with them how their cattle performed?
So we've got some ranches we purchase cattle from every year, and obviously we keep coming back because we like them. And again, we like to get that data back to them, but there's a relationship that we're going to have a pretty good opportunity to have those cattle presented to us. And so even though they don't have ownership in the cattle, every year, some years they partner, some years they own them all, some years they don't retain any of them. But those are relationships we keep pushing that data back to individuals. I think we've needed the sale barn cattle. We need to be able to get cattle that are in the right weight break. And sometimes there's a 4 or 5 way sort on some of these calves that get sorted between steer and heifers. And I just can't buy them all off the ranch direct. I can buy a cut of them. Sometimes I really want to buy a set, but I just can't afford them that day or don't have room for them. So it's not a guarantee that we're going to get them back, but we make a pretty good effort on the ones that we have that data on, and we can share some of that back anyway. But that's still a relationship that's needed. Mm-hmm. And so working with sale barns that are good about bringing similar type cattle in the same day, so there's enough volume for us to procure and buy enough volume to make a difference is important. So we've kind of like that approach as well, but we do a lot of direct bringing ranch calves back in. What we've had success with is bringing all of those people together and have conversations like we are today. When you've got a seed stock, a cow-calf, multiple cow-calf, backgrounders, feedlots, and even packing plants that can sit down and talk about where we've had success and where we've missed the boat on a few things. The most challenging thing is getting smart enough to ask the right questions sometimes. And so I think there's still questions we need to ask yet that we haven't discovered what those questions are. But when we sit down like that spurs some really good conversations to start laying out what's important for us to get covered. And I think those are nice opportunities. We can put those together, but the data transfer is not an easy thing. I started out doing VLOOKUPs and Excel spreadsheets, and boy, I'm glad those days are over with. But we put a lot of elbow grease behind trying to get some of that data presented back to people. And that's where I'm really excited about some of the opportunities we have going forward. And, again, the university's been really good about helping us lay out some good research so we can get smart enough to ask the right questions. That investment, along with the Meat Animal Research Center and that Mark in Clay Center, Nebraska, has been great to have that out our back door, and a population of cattle that's closed. Wow, what a powerful tool both of those are. And those land grant universities across the country have been so important in order to have good research and start asking the right questions.
Yeah. By university, he meant University of Nebraska.
That's the only one.
Shameless plug.
No other land grant universities in the country other than Nebraska.
We'll put the notes in the show notes. We'll put the links to all other universities.
Jackrabbits.
But that's a good segue into where do we go from here, right? I mean, what opportunities do you see in the future? What opportunities for data collection do you see, and what questions are you asking that we don't have answers to today, but will help us in the future?
In the beef business, every decision counts. Drovers delivers the expert analysis, market updates, and real-world reporting that cattle producers rely on to make smart, profitable decisions. From market updates to policy shifts and animal health, Drovers delivers expert reporting and real-world analysis that helps producers stay ahead. With a mission to help beef producers become more profitable, every story is built around what matters most to the cattle industry. Get informed. Get Drovers.
You know, I think getting rid of disease is one thing I want to get after. There's a lot of people excited about marbling, and I think that's good to be excited about. But if I could get respiratory resistant cattle on feed, I'm all in, you know, and I think those are types of things that we want to keep really focusing and identifying on. And that's a tougher, you know, that's not just a one trait scenario. That's something that's going to take a lot of data to get across, and we're going to have to work with a lot of people. We've been working with some other yards at trying to identify some of those traits, and I think it's going to take more than just one yard trying to tackle that.
How about bovine congestive heart failure? Does that affect you much today? And where do we go on that?
It's something that's out there. You know, I think it's another one I'd put in that category. I definitely think it's something that's genetic based. Nothing more frustrating than losing one at the end, especially when they're $3,200 a piece right now. That's an expensive debt at the end. And so I think some of those things rise up to the top end of my list to really take care of, because, you know, it's been years ago, but we had some of those hearts that wouldn't even fit inside of a 5-gallon bucket. And yet you had lungs that you could put in the 5-gallon bucket, and it shouldn't be that way. And so, you know, I think there's, when you see some of those things, you're trying to identify what happened, what went different there. Is that short gestation? Is that a genetic thing? What happened with some of that? But we obviously didn't make it across the finish line successful. And those are ones I'd like to get out of the way, because those are really expensive ones that we'd like to get out of the way.
And I think sometimes too, a yard doesn't know what their major health challenges are if they're not posting their deads. If you're not cutting them open and necropsying at least a few of them, you really don't know what. I mean, you're
just guessing.
You're guessing. And until you open them up, you don't fully know what their issue was.
Well, and it goes further than that. Like, we've been to yards where you got pen riders out darting animals, and they're not writing down the number and tracking it individually. And so you don't even know if you've dosed it 3 or 4 times before you even get out there. Like, I think it all comes back to, like, you know, what I love, John, about what you're saying is just your curiosity of why. You know, if we don't ask why, and we don't have the individual data there to sort of dig back, whether it's to the pasture or to the feeding regime or to the medications, we'll never know. And I think, you know, that's what's been pretty impressive, seeing what Darr's achieved, is always asking why. So,
you know, we've recently built a new processing facility. Our last one was built in 1988, and it still is capable of processing cattle. But things have changed a lot since 1988. And I think all of us can agree the first thing is the size of the cattle. But then the ask of what we're collecting has changed a lot too. We buried fiber into that new processing facility because we are scanning an EID tag, going up to the cloud, trying to bring that information back down in less than a second to make a decision on how we're going to sort it. I need to have that kind of speed and access. And I think I'm going to have that in the future. But, you know, I think the individual management standpoint, we've been scanning cattle in and scanning cattle out as they arrive and as we ship them out. But we're seeing which animals we're putting in the nose, the belly, the top, and the back of the truck. Are we getting loin bruising anywhere? Those are opportunities by having that technology and looking at it from an individual. Where are they at in that part of the trucking process? We're probably going to have to look at how we handle cattle and the size of trucks and the size of trailers and you know, what kind of an effect we have on that. And so there's some things we're learning from that standpoint as well. But again, we're selling beef, and we've got to make sure that quality stays on pace. And as we look back at some of these national BQA audits, we're failing and losing ground on some areas that we had success earlier in making headways. And so when I see those types of things, we better as an industry figure out where we have opportunities to change. And so I think especially, I've never seen this. I've got 95-cent cost of gains with 205 live cattle. It's screaming, make them bigger, right? And that doesn't look like it's going to change a whole lot for a while. So I think we better get used to having these cattle go to heavier weights to be able to bring the price point down in order to get more consumers to be able to afford our product. There's nothing better to get another consumer that can enjoy beef. But we're going to have to understand what challenges come with that. And so as we look at those individuals, just because it worked 4 or 5 years ago, this model's changed, and it's the ideal's a different animal. It's a larger animal that needs to stay efficient. So again, we kind of enjoy putting some presentations on of some of the cattle that have won, at Denver or won at Louisville, and look at the show ring and see how that's changed from, little Angus and Hereford that are below my waist when my father was showing to the Chianeas that we were showing in the, 70s and 80s. And, I'm 6'6", and you can't see over the top of the steer to see me until where we've moderated and really got that depth of rib and that power in cattle today. But the ideal changes depending on what the industry wants. And I'm just telling you, the ideal is changing to a larger animal that can stay efficient and put on weight and have that market flexibility and still have that and stay alive. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder, interesting, you said putting fiber into the new processing, but I wonder if there's a day when those cattle come through and you're using artificial intelligence to, look at the body imaging of the animal and make predictions based off of that. You might have robotics that do all the vaccinations. There's some interesting technologies that are capable and coming in the future that could change the way we do things.
Yeah, we definitely are going to see more artificial intelligence opportunities that come forward. But meanwhile, we got to survive with real intelligence.
Well, and also I think some of the artificial intelligence it's an interesting space, but the limitation in, if you take row crop or you take, some of these specialty crops, the data they're collecting on every square foot of field that they're planting those crops, they have so much data and they're collecting it in a consistent way. The challenge we have in the beef industry is we've got to work out how we're capturing that data in a consistent way with we don't have 5 versions of the same ranch name. Then we can start thinking about artificial intelligence. So I think what's exciting about the individual animal management is that will be the basis that lets these people who adopt that accelerate even further in future when things like artificial intelligence come in.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. You think AI will be able to look inside one of them and see how big that heart's getting, and so we can
Well, I've got a daughter in radiology, and there's times where she said, "Dad, do you think it's too late to switch and go back to animal science and get back into ag?" And I said, this ag will always take you. We'll take you anytime. So, go get that radiology degree so you can do it anywhere. But it's interesting. And we joked about it at Christmas. I said, hey, you asked that question when you went on that journey about going into radiology, and you've had great experiences, and that's definitely the pathway you want to go down. But understand, look at some of the things we're doing where we are scanning these cattle, especially as we're going into the yield grade challenges, and you're really trying to understand how much bone, how much muscle. We are doing CT scanning on full body CT scans of these cattle with some of the research that's out there. And again, I look forward to working with universities that can go to that scale. It's a scale that our industry can't do and keep on pace with, but we've got some universities that are helping with that project and really cutting those carcasses up and verifying that red meat yield is real. I'm excited about some of that research.
I'm very excited about that. We did some guys we worked with in the UK, and part of that business where they were looking at just the postnatal programming of these cattle for marbling. Like if you gave them extra sugars in the first 6 weeks of their life and they put a bit more marbling on, then how did that mean for like fine marbling versus thick marbling when you got to slaughter? And that all relates to being like radiology. Yeah, can you scan these animals as a 6-week-old calf versus not? So like there's just some really interesting research being done on a lot of this stuff. And it'll be interesting to see when they walk through a sorting barn in a while.
So you said universities, that was plural. That meaning there
That
are more
one
than
was.
one. Okay, I was just checking. There are more than one university. Okay.
You know,
He's a South Dakota guy. We know he wants to plug that.
you know, we work with so many good researchers. We spend a lot of our dollars in the state of Nebraska, going back to the University of Nebraska with the great opportunities there, but where we're working with cow-calf producers all across the country, whether it's in California when we're chasing after fall calves out there, or whether we're working down here in Texas. There's a lot of different universities we need to work with to be able to handle those local challenges. And so I think you have to kind of have that collaboration. And what's neat is that as land-grant universities, we've got a common bond to work with and go forward. And as long as we work together, we can be stronger. And as feed yards that are getting involved in programs, as cow-calf producers that are selling cattle in groups that are at sizes that make a difference, again, it takes a lot of us it's harder work to work with other people. I mean, if you could just be big enough that you could do it all by yourself, it is a lot easier. But most of us have to work with somebody else yet. And so as we do that, we have to give up a little bit of our independence, but we're so much stronger when we're working together. So I think that's just a concept we got to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I'd love that.
That's it. Well, we've sure enjoyed having you on the podcast today, and look forward to having you again someday.
Thanks so much.
John, thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Stay tuned. It's time for Ian, Jess, and I to go behind the beef. All right. So both of you have worked with John before, and so what did you think of that episode?
Below average. Just
Below average.
No, John's obviously excellent. Darr Feedlot has a lot going on. They really embrace technology, and they know how to utilize it and capture actual profitability from the data that they're using. And I think that that's one of our biggest challenges in the industry is people have all this data, but how do you use it, and how do you store it, and how do you data mine it and actually make something useful of it to help you make management decisions?
Mm-hmm. Do you have to feed cattle to do that, or?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Well,
What would you think?
yeah, some of the powerful things he talked about there, like the emotional parts, like rising tide floats all boats, and how do we work together as an industry if you're not the big guys to be able to do that. But I think if you actually look at what that means, and he did talk about it, it's like, this isn't about just beating the bell curve. And what do I mean by that? I mean, like, how do we as individual ranchers be better than average and have a lower standard deviation of cattle? Like, how are we more consistent and have a higher average than everyone else? And I think what was really interesting about what John's doing is, like, he's not just sharing the data back, but he's sharing the average of that feed yard. And often the challenge we have in this industry is you will look at your own standard deviation. You're like, well, what's good, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's my average? Am I good or am I bad? But by working with what John's doing, it's like, here's the average of all other cow-calf guys from your area.
Right.
Now you can start being like, oh, I'm in the bottom 20%,
Mm-hmm.
and then a conversation can start to happen, well, how do we get better, whether it's with your university, with your vet, with whoever it is. So I think, I know he's doing a lot, and, he's they're doing a lot of data and all that, but I just think it doesn't mean you can't start on a 20 head ranch. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the question is who do you work with to be able to find out whether you're good or whether you're bad?
Mm-hmm.
We want to make sure that there's opportunities and where you can improve.
Yeah. It's sort of like all the ranchers always have the best steak at their house, right?
Yeah.
If I've got, my 30 cows are better than the neighbor's 30 cows, you just know it, right?
Yeah. I mean, they're always the best. I'm not going to doubt that. Like every rancher is in the top 20%.
Right.
No doubt. So.
and what's interesting is we find out that's not the case, right? And so, and some of those are at the bottom, and some of them are at the top, and there's a lot in the middle. Yeah. And so, how do we move, across that pendulum, right? How do we move across from
that?
The bottom?
Like what John was saying, like $800 difference in these animals,
huge.
like that is a huge number, and that's not just money. That's an $800 difference in eating experience, probably as well. Like you take the bottom to the top, it's an $800 difference on health. Poor health, more deads versus like really healthy, good gut developing. Like it's what's underneath that number that I think is really, really interesting in terms of like how do you end up with an $800 difference on those animals, and more importantly, how do we affect change?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, as the value of these cattle continues to increase, that $800 is going to get bigger. It's $800 today, but as these cattle become more valuable, that those dollar numbers are just going to get bigger.
Yeah. And I think John didn't talk about it, but one of the things I've found really exciting about Darr is how they approach innovation. We're talking about the future of beef here, right? Like, and we're talking about all these exciting things. We're going to be talking about genetics and genomics in future episodes. And, the cost of getting started sometimes seems daunting. If you actually, and we probably should have dug in with this, John, but the way he approaches innovation is they'll be like, look, we're going to try something and we not expect to fail, but we plan to fail, right? So it's not a bad thing to fail. Where sometimes I do think in the industry, we're quite proud individuals, like, and every rancher is quite proud and doesn't like to admit failure. And I think one of the things Darr's instituted really well in their culture when you deal with them is like, let's try something. Let's have an R&D budget, right? And they do that very well. And I think, it's a shame we didn't dig into it with him a bit more, but it's, I think that's been a really interesting approach in terms of how he collaborates, but also tries new things.
Yeah, I think the one thing I noticed is, his passion for the industry and how conscientious he is. And I think that's a lot of ranchers and a lot of cattle people are that way. And we want to do a better job. Some of us just don't know how, right? And I think that's an important part of what we're doing here is to help people with the how, right? Help them with how we get started, how you can make improvement, where you're actually at. We all think, we have the best cattle that are out there, but if we never measure them, if we don't put them up against the neighbor's cattle or whatever in an unbiased evaluation, we don't know.
One of my favorite things about the Darr Feedlot Group is they are a large, profitable operation. There's no doubt about that, and they could play in the largest of feedlot producers, but they go back to the university and extension services for many things because they want to make sure that what they're doing on their operation is the absolute best and the best for them. And so for our feedlot roundtables that we host across the state of Nebraska, Darr, all of the owners, the partners, plus their employees come and support the university, but also are able to then take that information back to their operations. And I think a lot of times when some operations get so large, they can't see if there are changes that they need to be making, or they're not taking the time to go out and learn about new technologies or new diet or ration management, things like that, because, they have made it in their eyes. And for Darr, for me, it's so refreshing with them because they do support the university, they support the future generations, and they know that there needs to be that relationship with commercial feedlot production and university level feedlot research.
Well, and the other thing that struck me about, most of the guests or all of them, is that their ability or their interest in sharing what works for them with other operations that could potentially be competitors, right? But they're genuinely want to improve the beef industry. Yep. So they're not worried about the competitor down the street. And they're willing to share their practices, their best practices with other people. And a lot of people don't do that, right? When you get a lot of people that are successful and they're not going to tell you why they're successful and what they're doing to be successful. But people like Darr are. They're sharing that information. They want to genuinely help other feedlots and other producers.
Yeah, and we're all in it. Like that's sort of the way I was brought up. My old man set up a cooperative, like, we are the beef industry. If we can make beef better, we will all do better. Now, within that, you obviously want to be on the top percentiles, But but that's how you constantly challenge yourself. Like, how do we?
You want to beat the bell curve.
You want to beat the bell curve, yeah, exactly. So it's just, we're in a commodity industry. Let's try not to be a commodity, but if we can raise everyone, then that makes the whole bell curve move up as well.
One of the things maybe we didn't address or we didn't bring up was how someone gets started in individual animal management, especially if you're a cow-calf producer. How would you do that?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's an interesting one. I mean, we talked about a lot of complex stuff there, but at the basis, it really is about just starting to track your inventory digitally. And so, we have cow-calf producers that are just moving from pen to paper. So if it's calving time, just start logging them in the app. And, we're giving a free trial with that for the Future of Beef course. So go and log on, get that trial, get started. But any time of the year, whether you're bringing those cattle in to brand them or you're bringing them in to sell them, as soon as you're getting them through a chute, that's the time to start.
And so at calving, they're recording dates, when they were born, or what's that like?
Well, it depends. If you're a seed stock operation, obviously, you can start recording everything, birthing vigor, all the stuff that we heard about. But if you're just a cow-calf operation, date of birth, sex, and if you can, the dam of that calf. And then the power that can give you if you add weights later is incredible. But it's something you just need to capture as those calves are born.
Okay.
Yeah, so essentially just dam ear tag would be all that you would need in that scenario.
Yeah, be perfect. And it's really no more complex than that. Like, I think that's the exciting thing. And then that can lead into huge power. Like the date of birth, that will drive genomics and all of these other things later on as well. So I think, people underestimate how important that date of birth and the sex and that link to the dam can be for their operation.
Yeah, so just as long as you got your phone with you, you can open the app up and record tag number, date, and sex, and you're good to go.
You can also do it in a calving book or on a sheet of paper and then just do it in your house afterwards.
Transfer it after. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things is like, just record it. If your pen and paper is more comfortable for you, then great. If an app's more comfortable for you, then great. I know the app does save times of a number of ranchers I've spoken to whose wives, and it's not always wives, but like to get that 45 minutes back at the night when they're not typing it into an Excel spreadsheet, but that's up to them.
Yeah. And not to mention when the cow starts chasing you, drop your phone in the mud.
Or it's too cold outside and you can't take your glove off.
There's some really basic stuff that can be done. And I was really impressed with how John brings everyone to the feed yard and the packer and the cow calf, and they all catch up and they all discuss and they all talk about areas to get better. Like, that is almost what University Extension does, but they're doing it in their own little world. And I think it's not that little, but I think there's some great things to learn from there in terms of the best for the industry.
As often as you've mentioned BioWay Scale, you need to find a scale sponsor for the podcast.
Yeah. We don't have a scale sponsor. Maybe that's what we should ask.
Yeah, you should. As many times as you've mentioned it, you need to find one.
I know. Maybe I should start selling. But anyway,
anything else?
No, I think that was great. It's good to have people willing to share, as you say, and huge thank you to John joining the show.
Yeah. Thank you all for your input.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Future of Beef Show. Don't forget to check us out at thefutureofbeef.com with a free trial to Breedr app to take your operation to the next level. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to subscribe, share it with your friends, and leave us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Until next time, keep your boots on the ground and keep your eyes on the future.